Good morning. Here I'll be discussing the NET paper 3 December 2015. So first question is, JavaScript and Java has similar name because dash is are true. Now we'll see each option. First option is JavaScript syntax is loosely based on Java syntax. Now you all know how a JavaScript looks like and also how a Java program looks like. So we should understand what is meant by loosely based on. So the explanation is given for loosely based on. That is the meaning of loosely based on is nothing but to develop something from something else in a way that many things are different in each. So this is correct with respect to the point A or option A. JavaScript syntax is loosely based on Java syntax. So this option is correct. Now next option, JavaScript is stripped down version of Java. What is meant by stripped down? The definition of stripped down refers to a basic version of something. So the option A and option B are contradicting. Since option A is correct, option B is not correct. Okay. Now next is Java and JavaScript are originated from island of Java. I have given a very interesting note on how the name Java is was coined up. So you just go through that note. Now we are interested in this line where it says the name Java came from several individuals who were involved in this project Java. So it is the starting letter of their names. So that is how the name Java came. But also there is a discussion there. There is a island named Java Island where the coffee was first named Java. They use the name Java for coffee. So from Java Island came the name Java Coffee. And from Java Coffee came the logo. So indirectly Java Island also plays a part in the naming of the language Java. But the main reason is, as discussed before, that is the individuals who involve themselves in coining, in developing Java, the starting letter of their names were used to coin the word Java. Hope I am very clear. Next, we go to this question. Which of the following statements are true with reference to the way of describing XML data? Now you have three options. XML uses DTD to describe data. XML uses DTD to describe data, and XML uses XSL to describe the data. XML uses a description node to describe the data. Now let us see each point. XML uses DTD to describe data. Now if you see what is DTD here, DTD stands for document type definition, and see what is the use of DTD. A DTD defines the structure and the legal elements and attributes of an XML document. So you can say that XML uses DTD to describe the data. So that is fine. So A is correct. Now XML uses XSL to describe the data. Now if you see what is meant by XSL. XSL is a language for expressing style sheet. And you all know what's a style. You all have studied CSS. So it's something like CSS only. XSL style sheet is like CSS. So this is used to display the XML document. So that is the actual role of XSL. I have given the explanation of what is XSL. Now the point, XML uses a description node to describe the data. In XML DOM, that is document object model, XML DOM nodes, according to XML DOM, everything in an XML document is a node. Okay. So what is the third point? XML uses a description node to describe the data. So the first point and the last point is correct. That is option answer number 4 is correct. So I have given enough explanations. You can go through that. Next is, which of the following is or correct with reference to abstract class and interface? A class can inherit only one abstract class but may inherit several interfaces. Now in Java and C#, a class can be inherited by one class. That is, let it be abstract class, let it be a non-abstract class. A class can inherit one class, one base class. It cannot inherit multiple base class. This is something true for Java and in Java and C#. So if you remember that point, that means multiple inheritance is not allowed in Java and C#. But you can implement multiple inheritance using interfaces. You can define interfaces and you can implement multiple inheritance. So that is what the first point says. A class can inherit only one abstract class but may inherit several interfaces. Okay, so point A is true. Next we go to the second point. An abstract class can provide complete and default code but an interface has no code. See, in the case of abstract class, you can have methods defined. That means you can have a body for the method, you have code written inside the method. Also you can have methods without a body, that means there is no code written, or it is otherwise called abstract methods again. And it's another name when you declare a method without a code, it's also called method stubs. So such methods are called abstract methods, or an abstract class can have both methods, defined methods, that is with the methods with a code, also methods without a code, that is method stubs. But interfaces can only have method stubs. It cannot have methods with a code. Okay, so this is another difference between abstract classes and interface. So that's the second point which is being given here. So with this explanation, it's very clear that option number 3 is correct. That is, the points both A and B are correct. Now question number 44. In proposition logic, if given P and P implies Q, if these two are given, that is P is given and P implies Q is given. Now what they're trying to say is, it holds, if these two are there, then we can infer what. Okay, so you see this slide, you have a number of rule of inference which has different names like modus ponens, modus tollens, hypothetical syllogism, disjunctive syllogism, addition, exportation, resolution. So you have many like that. In that, if you see the first one, modus ponens, given P and P implies Q, you infer Q. Okay, so see the option, the second option, you have Q, so the answer is Q. Okay, now next question. In question number 56, the question is, in Unix, the command to enable execution permission for file mylife by all is. You have 4 options there. Now let's first see how will you change permission and how will you give various access to the files and directories. So in Linux or in Unix, you have a command chmod which is used to change the permission for file or directory. Now there are 2 ways to use chmod, the symbolic mode and the absolute mode. The syntax goes this way: chmod, reference, operator, mode, and then you have to give the file name. Now what is reference is, in reference you will mention you are allowed to mention letters like U if that person is a owner, G if that person belongs to a group, O if that person is neither an owner nor neither belongs to an owner, file's owner or file's group, then you use O, and A for all, that is UGO. So you can use either A or UGO together. So it stands for the same thing. Now that is for reference. In the syntax you have chmod reference. So we discussed about reference. So reference can only take 4 values, that is UGOA, or instead of A you can use UGO together also, that's also allowed. Now operator. When you take operator you have 3 operators. Plus is to add a specific mode to the specific class. I'll show you example. Minus is to remove a specific mode, and equal to is to assign a specific mode. So let us see how it works. Now what do you mean by mode? I was using the word mode. Now what do you mean by mode? Mode has 3 values, R, W and X. You know, R stands for reading a file, W stands for W or delete the file, and X stands for executing the file if it is a file. So chmod is used for working on file as well as directory, changing permission for file as well as directory. Now if it is for file, X stands for execution of the file, and if it is a directory, X stands for searching the directory. So this you should remember. In Linux terminal, when we type ls-l, we get the list of files and directories in the current working directory. So when you say -l, it gives you all the details about the file. Now if you see this image here, you get to see the file type as the first character. So the file type will be either hyphen or D. Hyphen stands for file, and if there is a D there, it stands for directory. And then comes the list of permissions. Now in this permissions, it's divided into 3 sets of characters with 3 characters each in each set. So if you see here, it's been divided into 3 groups. One is called user, the other one is group, the other one is other. So this user is to know the permissions for the owner, and the next 3 characters is to know the permissions for group, and the next 3 characters is used to know the permission for others, that is other than file owner and group owner. So first is file owner, second is group owner, and the third is others, other than file owner and group owner. Next, please don't bother about the hard link. If you want to know, you can surf and find out what is hard link. Next is owners. This is the user owner and the group owner. So the name of the user owner is seen, next the name of the group owner is seen. After that you get to see the file size, the actual size of the file is seen. Then the last modified time is seen, and then the name of the file is seen. So this is how in this structure it will be seen when you use ls-l. You can see there are around 4 files here and 1 directory. So you see it is hyphen first in the case of files, and it is D first in the case of directory. After that you have rw hyphen, rw hyphen, r hyphen hyphen for assign ASSGN1 underscore client.c. For this is the permission given. Like that I have shown the permission given for various files. So you all know when it is R, it is read permission, when it is W, it is write permission. and when it is X for file it is execute permission, and if it is X for directory it is search permission, search option. Now when you say rw hyphen, now I am discussing about assign1 underscore client.c. when you say rw hyphen under user, that means the user has the owner has the right to read and write and not execute. Next you see rw hyphen under group, then the group owner can read and write, cannot execute. Then you see r hyphen hyphen under others, that means others can only read the file, they cannot write or they cannot execute the file. So this is how you interpret this details of the file. Now here it is shown how to change the permission. In example 1 you see before the permission is as seen here. Now you are giving the command chmod u is equal to r. So you are changing the permission of the user to r. U stands for user or owner, that is equal to r. So that means the write permission and execute permission is not given for user. Now you see how the command, when you use ls-l, you see the change in the details. Okay, so user is only given the read permission, no other permission. Same way, there is one more example discussed where this directory is given the permission of only read and write, u is equal to rw, and you see the change. Okay, so these are few examples. Next, another way of changing the mode of or changing the permission of file and directory. For the user you can say chmod u plus x. You remember the operators we discussed, plus, minus, equal to, so we just saw equal to, this is plus. U plus x means the user is given the execution right. Okay, will be the execution right will be enabled. Next you see g plus x, that means the group will be given the execution right, and o plus x means the others will be given the execution right, and a plus x means all will be given the execution right. Also a plus x can be written as just plus x, that also stands for all, or UGO. So UGO, a, or nothing you specify, everything stands for all. Okay, now you can answer the question. Let's go back to the question. So in Unix, the command to enable execution permission for file my life by all is, so you know the option, all of the above. You have UGO plus x, you have a plus x, you have just plus x, so everything is correct. Now let's see how chmod is being used in the form of absolute mode. That means you're giving numbers to the permission. So the permission 1, the permission execute permission is given the number 1, write permission is given the number 2, and read permission is given the number 4, and the others are combinations of all these, so you can go through that. Let's see how chmod works in the absolute mode. So in absolute mode, actually a number is being given to each type of permission. A number is being assigned for read, a number is being assigned for write, a number is being assigned for execution. So based on these numbers, you form a number, a 3-digit number, where the first digit stands for user, and the second digit stands for group, and the third digit stands for others, and then we can execute the chmod. The numbers are assigned in this manner. Execute permission has the number 1, write permission has a number 2, and read permission has a number 4. In this table you see all different combinations of these permissions, and you can see how the numbers are being formed. We'll see an example. So here there is a file, test file, and you have the permissions already given there. You can see there the permissions are given as rwx, rwx, r hyphen hyphen. Now if this is how the permission is given, you can apply the numbers to these permissions and you can find the value. Now let us see one example. So if we say chmod 755 test file, what does it mean? It is rwx, r hyphen x and r hyphen x. How does this happen? You see the figure down here, I have clearly written. So 755, how is it 7 formed? It is 4 plus 2 plus 1. How 4 plus 2 plus 1? We saw previously that r has the number 4, w has the number 2, e has the number 1. You add everything, you get 7. In the same way 5. So the next permission, you just want to give only the read permission and execute permission. So 4 plus 1, that is 5. Again for the others, you want to give only the read and the execute permission, so the number is 5. So number 7 stands for the user giving all the permissions r, w and x. Number 5 stands for the first number. 5 stands for the permission for the group. You are only giving read and execute permission. The second 5 stands for the permissions given for others, that is read and execute permission. And when you say ls-l test file, you see to the right of the slide, get to see the exact permission is seen in detail. Like that, I have given more examples. chmod 743 test file. I have also given chmod 043 test file. We can find out how these numbers are being found. So, the next question is, what will be the output of the following Unix command? This rm stands for remove actually. Now next you see chap 0 backslash a square bracket 1 hyphen 3, again a backslash and a square bracket. Now what is this? This is actually, those who are into programming, those who are teaching programming languages, also anybody in IT and CS will know what is meant by regular expressions. Regular expressions are usually used for pattern matching. So this is also something like that is happening here. So you're trying to remove files with these names which starts with chap. Now what does this mean? That is what we have to find out of these 4 options. Okay. Now first let us study what does that square bracket stand for. When you are using a square bracket, this square bracket can surround a choice of single character, either a digit or a letter. For example, suppose you are using it in this way, that is as seen in the third line, capital C, small c in square bracket followed by HAPTR. Now if you give such a thing in this command here, in the remove command, what will happen is it would match either capital C chapter or small c chapter. But if you give CHAPTR, CH inside square bracket and APTR outside, it will either match CAPTR or HAPTR. This is what you have to understand. Whatever you're giving in square bracket, it will choose any one that is given in the square bracket. This you must understand first. Now suppose you want a range of alphabets to be matched, for example Z. Then inside the bracket you can give A hyphen Z. Now here I have given digits. CHAP in brackets 1 hyphen 3. That means it will match chap 1, chap 2 or chap 3. Okay. So this is how you go for, this is how you will mention pattern matching in a command. But what happens is here there is an escape character given. If escape character is used, then it literally matches with the characters after the escape character, the backslash. Okay. So if you see our command rmchap0 escape character, and you have given square bracket 1 hyphen 3, so it will match square bracket 1 hyphen 3, and also it will match the close square bracket because you have added one more backslash and square bracket. So what are the things that are available after the backslash, square bracket, opening square bracket 1 hyphen 3, also the closing square bracket. Okay, so let us see the question. Where is such an option present here in this question? It's very clearly seen. It is option number 1. Okay, so it is matching CHAP0 and whatever you have given after the escape character, that is square bracket 1 hyphen 3, and also you have given the closing bracket, so that is in option number 1. Let's discuss question number 59. Consider the following database table. Create a table which is named test and which has two columns, one which is an integer column and two which is an integer column, and one is declared as primary key, and two, the column which is named 2 is given as unique. That means that column will consist of only unique values, means the values that will be present in that column will be unique. That means no duplication. That is what is meant by unique. So next they are applying a check constraint to each column. They are applying a check constraint to the column named 1. Also they are applying the check constraint to column named 2. So the constraint applied is can have only values from 1 to 10. Column 1 can only have values from 1 to 10 and column 2 can have values only from 1 to 5. So how many data records tuples at most can this table contain? So I think most of you would have understood the answer is 5, but still I would like to just give an introduction. What is primary key? Everybody knows what's a primary key. Each table must have at least one primary key. That's very clear, or everybody knows. Now what is unique key? A column if a column is declared as unique, that means that column also should have only unique values. You cannot have duplication. So that should be taken care of. So that is what is meant by primary key and unique key. Now here I am explaining with the example what is meant by primary key and unique key. So there is a table which is named cars that is created. All this is done in SQL Server, and you have the ID column which is declared as primary key, and there are 3 other columns: name, number plate and model, and we have inserted few records into this table. Let's see how are these two similar and how are these two different. We should actually understand what is meant by primary and unique key. So the similarities is that columns with primary or unique key cannot have duplicate values. A very obvious similarity. So here I have shown we are trying to insert a row with the ID 2, which is already present in this table. Let us go to the table. So here if you see in the last part, we have inserted 5 rows. In that the second row has the ID 2. So let's come back, and here you are trying to insert 2 and you see the error message. It says primary key cannot. You are violating the primary key constraint. So this is about the primary key. The columns with primary or unique key cannot have duplicates. Now we will go for duplicating the unique key column, that is number plate. We had declared number plate as unique. So now we are trying to include 345. If we go to the slide where we are inserting values, you see the second row has the number plate as a value 345. So we are trying to insert 345 here. So what happens is the error comes saying you have violated unique key constraint. So now thing is very clear that the values in primary key column and the unique key column cannot be duplicated. So this means that for each value in the primary or unique key column, only one record will be returned. Okay, so that is what we should understand. Now what is the difference between primary key and unique key? A table can have only one primary key, only one column can be assigned as PK, primary key, whereas it can have any number of unique keys. For example, if you take the employee details, the employee ID will be the primary key, that employee's PAN card will be unique key, Aadhaar card will be another unique key. We are trying to add more than one primary key. You see here, create table cards to ID is also primary key, and also you see down model int primary key. Immediately it shows an error, cannot add multiple primary key constraints. Next, we are trying to add more than one unique key. That is, we have number plate is also unique and model is also unique. It doesn't show an error. That is allowed. Okay, that is one difference. Next difference is the primary key column cannot have null values at all, but the unique key column can have one null value. Let's see what do you mean by one null value and why it's not allowing more than one null value. Primary key column cannot have null value, that's very clear, we all know that. But when we say unique key cannot have null value, so here I have shown both for primary key. You say null, then you will see there is an error that you cannot insert null into the primary key column, that is seen here. Next, we are seeing inserting a null in the unique key column. So here, the number plate column, we are trying to insert null. It works perfect, and you see the output of the table is also seen. Select asterisk from cars, you see the row number 6, it has null. It's accepted, no problem, there was no error. But now if you try to once again enter null into this unique key column, number plate, it will show an error. Why? Because you are duplicating null, and the rule of unique key is what? You cannot duplicate values in unique key. So you are trying to duplicate null, so that will not be allowed. So null is taken as a data, and you have added once, fine, don't try to add it again. So then it violates the rule. And after that, I have given explanation about the constraint clause, the check constraint. You saw a check constraint. So I have not only explained what is check constraint, all the constraints that can be added. So it is actually an optional part of create table and alter table. So you have two types of constraint. A constraint can be added at column level as well as table level. I have given the details here. And next I have explained the various constraints under column, that is not null, primary key, unique, foreign key, and check. So check specifies the rules for values in the column. This is what we have to understand with respect to this question. The others you all know, this is column constraint. Next you have table constraints, which also have primary key constraint, unique key constraint, foreign key constraint, and check constraint. But there is no not null because you are talking about a table. There is nothing called not null for a table. So you can add these constraints with respect to column as well as table. And also I have shown how it is being added, how the column level constraint is being added, that is shown here, and how the table level constraint is added, that is also shown here. Okay. So this is about this question. So I think maybe we will go back to the question and it will be even more clear. So here you see the check constraint. 1 can only take values from 1 to 10 and 2 can only take values from 1 to 5. So how many data records or tuples at most can this table contain? So what did we see under unique? Values cannot be repeated, so let's go for the smallest. We cannot go for primary key. Let's go for the smallest, so you can only have 1 to 5. So that's why the answer is 5. I think it's very clear. Let's go to the next question. Question number 75. This is a very easy question. Dash tag is an extension to HTML that can enclose any number of JavaScript statements. So when it is JavaScript statements, it is the script tag which can contain any number of JavaScript statements. So I have shown a snippet of a sample of the HTML. So it starts with HTML, you see the script. So the script contains the JavaScript, the script tag. Okay, only the script will contain the JavaScript. And these are the sites I've referred to for finding answers to these questions. Thank you.